And we're live. Hi, everyone. I know today is a Labor Day weekend, so I thought that I wanted kind of to break up the boring routine of talking of all states and all these kind of very scary subjects of auditions and such, and break it up with something really funny. Some of my stories of my embarrassing moments that I had on stage and what I've learned from them. And one of the things that, I always thought of is how, as performers, we have a very tough job of learning to make mistakes in public, and then after making those mistakes in public, how to use that experience to avoid making the same mistakes. For example, if you are a visual artist, you have a luxury of creating your art in private. You could be in your pajamas, eating a banana or whatever, and whatever, creating this wonderful masterpiece, and you don't need to show it to anyone until you feel it's ready, until you feel that it's as perfect as it could get. And then once you created it, you don't have to worry about ever making a mistake with this one again, because it's set. That's it. You display it somewhere very proudly for the public to see, but only after you're completely satisfied with it. And so basically, you have the luxury, a visual artist has the luxury of making all the mistakes privately, right? Well, unfortunately, as performers, we don't have that luxury. And that, I think, is the scariest part of public performance. You really never know how it's going to go. It's an equation with so many variables. You have yourself, you're a human being, you have no idea how you're going to feel on a particular given day. For all you care, you could get a flu and you still would have to go on stage and play. Your violin is made of wood. You have horsehair on your bow. You got Pernambucum, or some of you have carbon fiber. I have a Pernambucum bow. That's all live. Those are all live things. So they very actively react to humidity and other things. And then you have the venue. Every venue is different. Even if it's this venue where you played a million times, you never know what's going to happen. The weather could be weird and everything could get sticky and then your hands stick to the fingerboard, or vice versa. It will be so dry that your hand could slip off the fingerboard. And then, of course, don't forget the audience. Whether, I've played some audiences where the sound was dropping down like a lead and I could feel that there's no reception whatsoever. Or our very favorite, all the music majors, the juries. If you're music majors, you probably know what the juries are. If you're not, basically, when you study in college, if you major in music, if you study an applied instrument in college, for example, if you're a violin student at UTRGV, your final exam is a solo performance for the jury, which are all our string professors of our string area will sit down and listen to you perform. And you have to perform your given repertoire, which would be a solo piece, some scales, some etudes, and so forth. And so this is all live performance, and it gets really, really intense. And, no matter how much you prepare, you never know what's going to happen. And unfortunately, that's a part of learning up and learning how to be a performer. And so since my students already started freaking out because the all region auditions are coming up pretty soon, then also my UTRGV, that's my private students who are still high schoolers. And then I have, of course, my UTRGV students, and our studio recitals coming up pretty quickly after the beginning of the semester. And so I thought, why not talk and share, and not just me, but if you have a funny story, please feel free and share. Or if you have a question about Allstate or any other auditions or anything, feel free to always post your questions. But I just wanted to share this, one of my most favorite, or the worst experience, but the favorite story to tell is when I was still in Moscow Conservatory and I was playing the Devil's Trills. Yeah, how's that for a jinx piece? It literally, I've never performed it since. So it was Tartini's The Devil's Trills Sonata. And if any of you played it, it's quite a virtuosic sonata. It was written by Tartini. Supposedly, the story goes that he was sleeping and and he saw the devil come to him in the dream. So in his dream, he gave the devil the violin. And so the devil played this amazing sonata. And as soon as Tartini woke up, he wrote down whatever he could remember. And that became the famous The Devil's Trills Violin Sonata. And the name says it all. Yes, it's quite difficult, and it does have a lot of complicated trills, like regular trills, very fast moving 16th notes with trills, but also it has this huge cadenza where you have double trills and triple trills. And so it's quite spectacular and really beautiful music. So when I don't remember, I think it was my second year at conservatory, Moscow Conservatory. I had a privilege of studying there back when it used to be actually still Soviet Union. It was just about falling apart. But and the juries were very, very serious. You know, your grade was very important. So I worked very hard on that sonata, and I learned it, and I knew it very well. It's a sonata for violin and piano. So I rehearsed my pianist very well. She was an amazing, actually, pianist that we had. And so we're starting the first movement. It's going very well. I feel really good. And then all of a sudden I hear this horrible sound. And it was my shoulder rest that I realized just slipped. So I'm thinking, okay, this sonata has several movements. So all I need to do is just get to the end of that movement. And then in the break between movements, I'll have an opportunity to fix my shoulder rest. Well, of course, it didn't last that long. And actually, literally a few seconds later, my shoulder rest drops on the floor. So making this huge noise, embarrassing. So I'm trying to keep my cool. I'm like, okay, this happens. It's not my fault. Everybody knows that things like that happen. So here's my chance to show the jury that I can, even deal with that kind of challenge on stage. So I pick up my shoulder rest, put it back down. Now, the embarrassing thing is, like, it's one thing if you're playing solo, but when you're also with the pianist, now you have to figure out where you start, so we kind of communicate a little bit. So we keep going, right? We keep going, goes well. Then the next movement, I'm doing that fast movement, going really well. The trills are working out. I'm on a roll. And then I literally dropped my bow on the floor. I mean, that never, ever happened to me since then. Even when I practice at home, it never happens. How the heck did it happen? I don't know. But I have to tell you, my bow literally fell out of my hand and hit the stage in front of me. And imagine, so you're on the stage. We played our juries on stage, like in the hall. And then you have all these big shot famous violinists who are listening there to you, and scrutinizing your playing. I mean, I wanted to just fall through the stage at that moment, but I picked up that bow, kind of looked at the pianist. We continued going. Really, I managed to actually survive, play the whole sonata. Finally, I'm at this final cadenza, this big cadenza where you have triple trills at the end, and I'm like trilling 5 1 5 1 5 1 5. And I guess because it got so intense, and I guess I was so on the edge already of my concentration, the last thing I do, I forget the last chord. I mean, it's a G minor chord. I totally forget it, and I stop. Like, I completely freeze. And then I hear my professor yelling at me, it's G major, G major. Well, it was actually G minor. I guess she got nervous too. So thankfully, I didn't listen to her. I did unfreeze, played that G minor chord, got off stage, and just wanted to go and bawl somewhere in the corner, because I never got anything less but an A on my juries. Well, I was pretty sure I was just hoping. I wanted to see whether I completely failed it and I would have to retake the semester, So I'm sitting there bawling, and then finally, after everyone played, I catch my professor in the hall, and I'm ready for the worst news. And she goes, well, you had some interesting things happen, but you got an A. And I'm like, are you kidding me? How could I get an A? She said, well, all of those things that happened, number one, they were all accidents. It was very obvious. And it was quite impressive that in spite of all the things that happened, you managed to keep going on. You actually showed you were very, gracious communicating with the pianist. I mean, this was like the best way you could handle it. Plus, she said, the jury loved it because it was like a circus. They were already so bored with all the juries. They were rolling around while you were playing. And so for that, they gave you an extra bonus. So I basically got one of the best grades for that, the worst performance ever, even though I I have to be honest, I never played that sonata ever again. I never programmed it because I felt like that was just the jinx sonata. Maybe it has something but the word devil in the name. But I did learn quite a few things from this experience, and I wanted to share with you. And also, I would love to hear from you. If you guys have any funny experiences from your performance, maybe orchestra performances, maybe solo performances, maybe even practice, I would love for you to share and to share what you learned. So what I particularly learned from that horrible experience was that no matter, like I said, no matter how well you are prepared, and I don't want you to be negative, I don't want you to expect anything bad, no, but you know, performance, basically stage is life. I think Shakespeare said that the stage actually life is like stage, or something like to that sense. So you are working with many variables, and you yourself are a human being. So basically, it's not a bad idea sometimes to kind of think, what would I do if this happened or that happened? Maybe just a little bit, like have a plan. For example, as far as the shoulder rest, I think it happens to many people. And so it's a good idea to check your shoulder rest. And if it starts getting loose, maybe get a new one before that happens to you, right? But then also, what for me, the most educational thing from that whole experience was that I actually didn't even get a bad grade. So, and I think that is what could make it worse for us. When something like that happens, we automatically assume the worst reaction from the audience. We automatically feel like the audience is thinking we're losers. They're not happy. They're going to judge us. And I think that is what I learned the most from this experience, that actually the jury, they gave me an A, and they really these people were great musicians, obviously, and they had enough of the understanding of performance and of the piece that I was playing to overlook things that were obviously out of my control. And most of the time, in my experience, the audiences are much more positively intended than anybody else. That's what we think. There are some audiences that feel like you could feel the very judgmental vibe, but it's very rare. And so one of the things I want to share with you is whenever you go on stage, no matter what happens, technically you have no idea what your audience is thinking. And so what happens first, important, what happens in your head? What is it that you assume that your audience is thinking? And that is what's going to make it or break it. And technically, that is totally up to you. Nowadays, the concert etiquette, people are pretty much aware of it. No one's going to throw tomatoes at you or boo at you openly, right? No matter what they're thinking, they're not telling you that. They're not communicating it to you. You are all technically, you're by yourself, far away from your audience, and you actually have the right to think whatever you want about what they're thinking, right? You have the control. And so because of that, think about before your next performance. I mean, if you really tune yourself into assuming that your audience is very supportive, that they're there to cheer you, even if you make a mistake, if you teach yourself to assume the best about your audience, I think you will make the best out of those moments. And so here we got some comments. Josh Sides. Hey, Josh. Yikes. One time I was doing cymbal rolls in a band orchestra piece, and I had this big roll at the end of the piece. So the end of the piece comes, and I'm playing the cymbal roll as loud as I can. Oh, my goodness. I had something similar happen. Hi, Dr. Sides. Hey, Crafty Games. How are you? What would happen if your bow hair snaps in the middle of a performance? My worst fear. Oh, my goodness. That is, you mean like the whole bow or just one hair? If it's just one hair, it's not as bad. It's not as bad as long as it doesn't get under your left hand. But if it's the whole thing, then you just have to find another bow. For that, just keep another bow handy in your case and just excuse yourself, go backstage, grab your other bow and play. If you're playing with the orchestra, then you can grab, the whole hair. Yeah. thankfully that never happened to me. But yeah, this is a great question. So what usually I do have always two bows, and actually something like that almost happened to me. So what was it? Last concert, last semester, what was it? Spring semester, I was invited by the UTRGV Symphony, the school where I work, the student orchestra, to perform Carbon Fantasy with them. And that almost happened to me on stage. But thankfully, I realized that my bow wasn't functioning well during the rehearsal. And so I decided to use my other bow. Now it was going on and off, it just wasn't tightening. And with me it was the opposite. All of a sudden the hair was completely loose. And I am really grateful that didn't happen on stage. Now, since I just used my other bow and everything worked out. But if that were to happen on stage, I would have grabbed one of my students from the orchestra bows, we would have swapped and I would continue playing, but that would be very, very stressful. So for that, all you have to do, just make sure you keep two bows in your case. Have another bow, even if it's a worse bow, have it ready to go, because in that case, you can just walk off stage, grab your other bow, come back and play. I hope that helps, Josh. And I'm just letting it go. And then I noticed that no one else is playing anymore. And I look up and I hadn't noticed that the conductor had ended the piece like 10 seconds ago. So I missed it. Oh my goodness. Now that is pretty embarrassing. So I was just playing this loud cymbal roll all by myself for 10 seconds. Oh, so what happened after that? How did you handle yourself after that? I'm very curious to know. By the way, Josh Sykes is my son. He has the best ears in our whole family, the Sykes family, and he ended up playing drums. So that's kind of a running joke, which is awesome. I love drums. I especially like it when he plays marimba because it sounds very pretty. I was... Oh, really? Oh, that's so... crafty games. Okay, you're saying you had the same. Yeah, you know what? I also had a similar experience. I want to share. It wasn't quite as obvious, but I was in the orchestra profession. I was playing in the professional orchestra, and we were playing this piano concerto. And the piano concerto had a big, very big, impressive cadenza. Pianist had impressive cadenza in the first movement, and so right before his cadenza started, the orchestra, the violins had pits, all the strings had pits. And then also after the cadenza, we were supposed to come in on pits. Well, during the orchestra rehearsal, the pianist never played the cadenza, and there's the pits measure here, then it says cadenza, and then right next measure is the next. So I never reiterated pits in my music because I always remembered in the rehearsal, because it's right after the measure where we start playing pits. But what I forgot at the concert, the pianist was amazing. He played this ridiculous cadenza that was absolutely breathtaking, because I forgot completely what happened before the cadenza. And then the very first note that was in the music was the D. So we're supposed to pit, right? Well, the composer put a forte under that pits note. And when I saw a forte, you never think of dynamics pits. So I completely forgot that was pits. So all string section, not just violins, all the strings of the orchestra go, and I go, and I sat right outside. I think I was actually an assistant concertmaster. I thought I was going to die, because in that particular hall, the audience was right, very close up to the stage. But to my amazement, no one seemed to notice it, even though it was so loud, because, of course, they were all watching the soloist. So in a way, I kind of got off easily, although my stand partner, she was rolling. She was laughing so hard for the rest of the concerto. So Josh, I was just like, whoops. The other percussionists were laughing at me, and the conductor looked pretty mad. Okay, yeah. But, in the end, nothing horrible happened, right? That's one of the things that I like to say when people ask me why I do what I do. Well, obviously, I love music. I love the feeling when I play beautiful music. But my most favorite thing is the performance, because when I get to communicate that music to my audiences, right? That is just that moment of just process of communicating with other human beings without words, with music as a language, but connecting, that connects us in so many different ways and so much deeper, emotionally deeper, and just almost spiritually deeper, without even having to translate. It's the most amazing feeling in the world, right? And then also on the other hand, you're almost connecting. You can almost read the composer's mind. The more you play their music, the more you understand, how they were thinking, what they were feeling. And it's just an incredible experience. And then the fact that as you're playing music, you usually, if you play it well enough, then your audience is able to actually share whatever you'll feel at the moment with you. It's just an amazing experience. And so as much as, of course, that is the most important thing that I love. But the two other things that I love about being a violinist, a performer, is that if I make a mistake, no one dies or goes to jail. And I think that is the most important thing that we have to remember, guys. I know that it feels scary and embarrassing and things, but at the end of the day, Josh, just like with me, like my jury, they loved it. They say it was just like a circus. They just totally loved rolling around, laughing at me, and they had a great time. No one died or went to jail. The same, Josh, maybe it was embarrassing to make a mistake, but technically I bet a lot of people had fun, laughing at you. So it's not as bad as it seems. But let's see. So what are the lessons we can learn, for example, from my experience when I whacked that huge D, the only person in the whole string section of the orchestra, right? And I mean everybody, all the strings, lower strings, upper strings. Well, I learned my lesson to never, ever trust myself again. And every time, if we play pizzicato and we drop off and then maybe there's some rest and then we come back, I always reiterate for myself. I always put pizz again, because I've learned my lesson hard way. As far as the bow here, yeah. So what else? I have to tell you this. This is not actually this is from my dad's story. That's a good one. What you eat before you have a performance. So my dad, I grew up traveling with my mom and dad. My mom and dad met and fell in love, and they got married when they were in the band. They were both singers in the pop, like kind of rock pop band. And before I had to go to school, I was traveling with them. So I grew up backstage and I saw a lot of things. I also heard a lot of stories. And so that was one of the stories that my dad told me. They were always traveling. And so they were in somewhere in the city where they had a lot of, I guess, fruit trees and things like that. And musicians are always hungry, it seems, whether it's in the US or in the Soviet Union, whatever. Musicians are always hungry. And so they all saw there were these huge plum trees. And so my dad had this bright idea to eat a bunch of plums off of a tree. Now, not only the fact that they weren't washed, but they weren't quite ripe, they were green. And so he was on stage finishing. He was so talented. He was this amazing singer and he was so charismatic that no one ever wanted to go after him. So he was always the last, closing the concert. And so he comes out, with this very dramatic song. He starts singing, and then his stomach starts growling, and he feels like he really needs to go. And so he said, he tried the first verse, his eyes started popping out, and he would look really green, and he's trying to hold it in. But then, about 10 seconds into the song, to the horror of all the band on stage, he just literally drops his mic on the ground and runs off stage. Because you really need to visit the restroom at this point. So good lesson for you. Please make sure you don't eat any unripe fruit or anything that might result in some kind of discomfort on stage. Make sure that you eat something good before. So crafty games. Have you ever got the same piece with a different key signature than everyone else? And have to play for small group, and had this happen multiple times. But no, oh my goodness, this is really ridiculous. No, that never happened to me. How was it a mistake? Was it your teacher's mistake, or how could it even happen? And tell me what you did. Did you improvise? Did you transpose? I tell you another story about the key signature though, and that actually was very interesting experience because I got laughed by everybody else. So when I was studying music back in at a very special music school for talented kids back in Russia, we have had harmony and theory class like 3-4 times a week, and it was a small group, and part of the class was we had to write dictations, which musical dictation. Oh, you had to improvise with piano. Wow, that is pretty good. That's some guts. So you didn't give up. That's awesome. So back to my story. So in the musical dictations where, for example, I play for you, right? I play to you and I tell you, you guys don't see the music. You have to write down. I tell you we're in D major, we start on D, and then you write down what you hear, the key signature, the right notes, the right rhythms, and then you get graded. Well, I ended up, I think I left the classroom to use the restroom. When I came back, the teacher already announced what the key was and what the first note was. And it was some complicated dictation. Like we had really sometimes 2 voice, 3 voice, 3-part dictations. So when we finished writing, so I wrote down my dictation. I didn't hear what everybody, when the teacher announced what the key was, I just wrote what I heard because by then I already kind of had, yeah. And so when everybody submitted their work, my theory teacher goes, everybody has theirs written in D major. Mine is in D flat major. And so all the kids started laughing at me. Oh my goodness, look at her. She's so stupid. She wrote it half a step lower. And then my teacher takes my dictation and said, wow, do you know you have perfect pitch? I'm like, why? She said, because this piano is actually out of tune. It is flat, half a step flat. So I was actually the only person who had perfect pitch. And because she didn't announce that the dictation she played was in D major, I just wrote what I heard, and I heard D flat major, and that's exactly what the piano was playing. So everybody actually. So I laughed the last. I had the last laugh because she actually, gave me a compliment. And that's how I discovered that I had perfect pitch. So sometimes, those funny things, actually, they end up putting you in a better position. Like this is a great experience. What else? I wonder if you guys have any questions at the upcoming auditions. So I kind of did this on purpose because I don't know if you guys heard, but I wanted to share something exciting with you. I don't know if you've heard, but I've been chosen as one of the, I don't know if you know what TEDx is or TED Talks are. So I'm really excited because I've been chosen as one of the 15 speakers for the upcoming McAllen TEDx. They're going to have conferences. It's basically, the TED stands for Technology, Entertainment, and Design. And it started in California where they would select it was a very exclusive event, and they would select very distinguished people in the area of technology, entertainment, and design to give talks that communicated some very important ideas. And so a few months ago, I found out that the TEDx is an event that is organized with the same, goals in mind, and they do it together with TED, but they just do it anywhere in any other place. So it's independently organized TED event. That's what the X stands for. And so my former student actually nominated me to be one of the speaker, and they had over 200 nominations, and I had to submit a 3-minute speech. And so I was like, when they wrote me back and said, thank you for your submission. We have over 200 candidates, so we're gonna getting back to you like a month later. I'm like, no way I'm going to make it. And I did. So I'm excited because this is going to be a wonderful event. It's going to happen in McAllen Arts Village. And they have Michael Fossum, who is one of the speakers, who is a former astronaut. I think he's like vice president or president of Texas A&M right now. They have Sister Norma, I forget her name, the very famous like Catholic person here. And then they have all these amazing people from the community, what from actually both sides of Rio Grande, and some of them don't even live in the valley anymore, but they came from here, like Michael Fossum. And there's a woman who was the very first woman to ever receive PhD in it's some really molecular science, or from Rice University, and she actually is from Mexico originally. She now teaches in UTRGV. So we have two UTRGV professors. It's myself and Karen Lozano, Dr. Karen Lozano. So it's really, I'm really excited. If everything goes well, and the event goes well, then they will put the talks that they like on the TED channel, and then maybe you guys can see it. The event itself will be in November 12th in the Arts Village, but they only have 100 seats. So anyway, and so I was thinking about the fact that I had an advantage in a way, because even though I'm not a public speaker, but just being a performer, we have this advantage of learning kind of how to deal with that pressure of being on stage. And I found at some point of my life that the most important thing is not to take yourself too seriously. And all of those funny things that happen, the more you think of those and the more you analyze what happened after, you realize it's really not that horrible. I think what is much worse is the dead performance, when it's so boring and not musical. Like for me, I'd rather listen to something that has life and soul in it than is completely perfectly technically immaculate, but I want to fall asleep. So I think we have to remember that music is an emotional experience, first of all, and that's what we want to do. And so so today, I know it's a Labor Day, so I didn't expect a very long live, but I'm glad you guys tuned in, and I'm glad you shared your stories. I really appreciate you, Crafty Game and Josh Sides, and shout out to all of you. If you have any questions, ask them now. If not, I think we're gonna go enjoy our Labor Day. I hope you guys are grilling, but just don't get too worked up about the audition process. Try to stay within your space. Come from the place of power before you go, and think of things that you really enjoy doing. Like think of, oh, I really have great sound, and go from there. Oh, I really enjoy playing this. I can play this so pretty. Don't start thinking, oh, there's that one note that I'm afraid I'm not going to make, because that is a recipe for disaster, right? So you want to come from the place of power. And the most important point is you want to always be gracious to your audience. Don't think of them as these vicious sharks that are sitting there ready to bite you because for every mistake that you're going to make, because that is your perception, and that's what's going to put you on the defensive. Now, and like I mentioned at the beginning, you really have no way of knowing what they're exactly thinking until maybe afterwards, and then by then it doesn't really matter. So when you go in, no matter what happens, just think that you're playing to, I think, of the most favorite people in your life, and think that they're the ones who are listening to you. Stephanie, hey Stephanie, this was great, love, fantastic advice. Thanks for listening. Okay, and we just had our orchestra auditions with my students, and so that was also advice for them. Okay, you guys, thank you so much again. I think, hey Clyde, I think I'm just gonna, unless Clyde wants to share any funny stories, experiences being on stage. I know you have a lot. Any funny mariachi stories you have for us? I'm putting him on the spot. So yeah, there are plenty, especially when you play in the orchestra. It's a little bit, I think people are, because you're in a group, people are a little bit more relaxed, and sometimes really, really ridiculous things happen. But well, I guess this is it. I will probably, we will probably do another live on Saturday. I don't know for sure. Okay. Hey Jack Lou. Hi. Oh, no. That's an interesting question, Jack Lou. Hi, have you watched the masterclass of Perlman? If yes, what do you think? Oh, I unfortunately no, I haven't, but I'm sure it's amazing. I mean, I love Perlman. By the way, I had a privilege of playing with him a couple of times. When I was in Oklahoma Philharmonic, he played Tchaikovsky with us, and it was phenomenal. And he's the nicest person ever. And one thing I cannot comprehend about Perlman is how does he play in the higher positions with those huge fingers? And that's amazing. Now I'm sure if I watch it, I will love it because he's wonderful. He has beautiful sound. He has so much soul in his playing. And he's just a really friendly person. I really like him. And before going, I remembered a funny story from actually one of my favorite violinists, David Oistrakh. I don't know if you guys have heard of him. He was the old school. He was like very big in around 50s, 40s, 50s, 60s, 70s. He was the winner of the first. No, wait a minute. Was it the first Queen Elizabeth competition? Yeah, I think he was the one who won the first prize. And so he was one of the biggest names in Soviet Russia of violinists, and my favorite. So David Oistrakh, he was telling this funny story that he was playing a chamber music concert with his colleagues. It was a quartet. And so they were rehearsing really long, that one spot, because for some reason it just wasn't coming out right. And so in the end, they decided that they just could not get it right, and they did not want to rehearse anymore because they just didn't have any more time. So he told his wife, honey, when we're getting close to this part of the quartet movement, can you please just drop your purse in the audience? And she did during the concert. So, and I thought that was a really funny story. He actually shared it because he thought, we think of these great, amazing people who are they are incredible. Someone like Perlman, like Oistrakh, and it almost seems to us that they're invincible and perfect and so amazing. But they're human beings too, and they have their moments. And I think it helps. It's very nice. I appreciate when people like that share stories and don't mind being vulnerable instead of posing as these perfect, almost above human beings, because I think that is encouraging to all of us, knowing that we're all human, we're all making mistakes. But you see, there's always a more lighthearted way to treat that mistake that doesn't scare you out of your mind before you play. Okay, Clyde, I've had some funny experiences while playing with mariachi for sure. One time I went to take the mic off the stand and I struggled so much. Finally, it came off and hit me in the face. Oh my goodness. Ever heard of David Nadine? He was concertmaster of Bernstein. Yes, of course. Has he ever done any master classes online or anything? Have you ever heard him teach? That would be interesting. Orchestral playing is a very different ball game, and that reminds me of, this is a real story actually from more of the orchestral, anecdotes. So one of my former professors, who was a concertmaster at one of the orchestras, he said that they were having auditions, and as you know, orchestra auditions, they give you a list of excerpts that is required for the audition, but also you have to usually perform a movement of a solo concerto. Usually they ask for a romantic and a movement of a Mozart concerto, right? And so this particular audition, he said, we had several romantic concertos that we required, and they could choose any one of those. And one of them was Mendelssohn concerto, first movement of Mendelssohn concerto. And he said, and so when it was time for this number 43, whoever comes out, and this person comes out, of course, it's behind the curtain, and they ask him to play the concerto first. And on his paperwork, it says that he's going to play Mendelssohn concerto, right? So the guy starts playing. I kid you not. So they stop him, and they so they don't know what it is, and they ask him to start again, and he keeps playing. So at this point, I think they dropped the curtain and everything. They just asked him, "What are you playing?" And she said, "Well, you're required to ask for a Mendelssohn concerto." And the guy goes, they said, "Well, we meant a solo part. So why would I play a solo part if I am auditioning for the orchestra?" Yeah. So those are the kind of things that really, really happened. And then there was one anecdote. Now, I don't know how true it was. Supposedly, one of the very, very big violinists, I'm not going to say who, was playing some big hall, I don't know, Royal Albert Hall or whatever, and he was playing, the fifth movement of Lalo. The fifth movement of Lalo Symphony Espanol. If you remember, it starts with like bajillion orchestra playing bajillion number of measures that go. So it really goes for a lot of measures. So it starts very, very soft, and they repeat that phrase until it gets really, really loud, and then diminuendo, and then the violin comes in. Well, the story goes that the violinist wasn't happy with what they were paying him, what they were going to pay him for the concert, and so the negotiations didn't go as well as he wanted to. So there you are. They played through the whole Lalo Symphony Espanol, and there's the last movement, and the conductor they played that whole thing, a million times. And so conductor turns to the violinist when it's time for him to come in, and the violinist just doesn't play. So the orchestra starts repeating it again from the beginning. And so at that point, the conductor looks at the violinist, and the violinist says, "I want twice as much. Like, I want 10 grand. And the conductor says, "No." Then the time rolls around. It's time for the violinist to play. The violinist still stands. So basically, eventually, the violinist didn't start playing until the conductor agreed to pay him as much as he wanted. Okay, craft again. Me and the flutist play a solo together, and whenever she cannot keep her music binder open, I move my stand over so she can play. Okay, that's funny. Yeah, in the orchestra, you can get away with a lot of things. So that's one of the, not so much in chamber music. I remember one time where, and that is actually a very good lesson, that's why I switched. I love this thing because I don't have to worry about fixing my pages. So a lot of chamber music, chamber music, you always use music. And chamber music is a very small ensemble, and every instrument gets a single part. Therefore, you hardly ever get a lot of rests. Yet you have a lot of pages of music, so it's very easy. So you have to prepare your music. You have to tape every movement together so you don't lose any pages. And you have to think of where your rests are so you can prepare your music so you have enough time for rest. Well, I remember I hated doing that. And it's bad. So if you are getting ready for a chamber music concert and you're using paper music, please tape the music so all your movements are together. Because what happened to me, and my teachers told me a million times, this is going to happen one day, and it did. So we were playing, and it was a quartet in residence. When I was at AU, we were graduate quartet in residence. That was kind of our assistantship, is to perform. And we actually had this exciting trip to France. We were playing concerts in France. It was so exciting in several different conservatories. And of course, one of those concerts, we are playing our quartet, and I realized that I'm missing the next page. And so it was awful. I had to basically tell my friends. Actually, no, I'm lying. No, thankfully, what happened, it happened before we started that quartet. Yes, thankfully, that I remember. Thankfully, but it was still very embarrassing because everyone was getting ready to start the first chord, and then I looked and I realized I was missing the next page, so we had to kind of go down. I had to get up, and it was extremely awkward. Go backstage, try to find that page. It took me a while, finally found it. So yes, so please, and that's why I love using my iPad So if you are playing off of the real music, please tape it. Okay, Jacques. Most embarrassing stage moment for me. We were playing chamber music, piano, horn, and violin. Okay, at a hospital, and the wind blew, and the scores went away during the performance. That is awful. I know. Oh, I have to tell you this story from my daughter's life. This is like so hilarious. She's a cellist, and right now she's in Manhattan School of Music doing her master's in cello performance. She said that they played for a wedding, a similar situation, and so when she didn't realize they were going to perform outside. And as they got out, and when she realized it was outside, it was on the hill. So, and it was extremely windy. It was in Kansas City. So thankfully, she was chewing some gum. So she literally got this chewed up gum and stuck her pages to the stand. So that's pretty creative. But speaking about iPad, I tell you, this was a terrifying story because I was using my iPad and I have a pedal. I love it because I just tap on the pedal and it turns page for me, right? It's amazing. But my daughter that I just mentioned, Esther, she never uses iPad. She sticks with the old music because she always tells me it might not work. I don't trust electronics. So it's kind of funny because I'm the older person. I like technology, but she doesn't in this case. Well, and actually she was right. It did happen to me. So one time I was playing, and it was a sonata, violin piano sonata. So I was in the middle of the movement and I tapped my pedal. The iPad doesn't budge. It is not turning the page. So what I did, the only thing I could do, thankfully, it was a piano sonata. And you know, piano score has the violin part in it. So I just basically just walked over to the piano and I just stood behind her and finished the movement. And I got these thunderous applause at the end because I guess the audience, to me, was like the most natural thing to do. Of course, I'm going to go and do it because what else? I can't stop playing. But they were, and like after the end of the concert, oh my goodness, everyone was saying, how did you do that? That was amazing. I'm like, well, what else do you do? So yeah, it was very impressive to the audience actually. And then later, for those who might be using iPad, I was terrified, of course, when that happened. But my pianist husband, he is a computer person. And so what he told me, it turns out that when, I have this habit with my phone and my iPad, I never turn them off. And so what he was saying, that this is just the kind of thing that can happen if you didn't reboot your iPad for a long time. So basically, so this is a very good advice. I follow it every time now, and it never happened since then. If you're using an iPad or any kind of tablet for your music, make sure to turn it off, completely off before the performance, turn it back on, and then that won't happen because what happened, it just glitched because sometimes it needs to reboot. Okay, so thank you guys so much. That was wonderful. And just basically remember this: when next time at the concert, don't take yourself so seriously. Second, run with it, be ready, be relaxed like ninjas. They practice like not reacting to anything, being free of any reaction. And this way, when something unexpected happens, they react much faster, right? And then be gracious to your audience. Don't think of them like vultures or sharks. Most of the time, I am in the audience. Like even when I sit in the juries, when I listen to my students and I have to give grades, I've sat in the competitions many times, even when you're playing for someone who is trying to judge your level of playing, most of the time, 99.9% of the time, the audience is always on your side, guys, because they appreciate the work that went in, and especially if you are confident and you're giving them this wonderful experience, even in case where I have to maybe give grades or something. My students know I'm their biggest cheerleader because it's still a wonderful thing to experience live music. Okay, so have fun. Happy Labor Day, everybody. Make sure don't work on Labor Day because that's what Labor Day is for, right? Thank you so much, guys. Bye.